Oh, hello, Internet. I'm back today to talk about another Shudder exclusive film, and I've been really surprised lately. Shudder has been putting out some really incredible content, and they're really great about giving these independent artists a platform to release their content. And it's been really awesome because in 2021, I feel like some of my favorite movies I've watched this year have been on Shudder. I've got a lot of great content. I've reviewed a lot of the ones that I really enjoyed. And today I'm back to talk about a movie that really caught me by surprise. And that movie is The Power, directed by Corinna Faith. The Power follows Val in 1974 London as Britain prepares for electrical blackouts to sweep the country. She arrives for her first day at the crumbling East London Royal Infirmary. Most of the patients and staff have been evacuated to another hospital due to the blackouts, and Val is forced to work the night shift, finding herself in a dark, near-empty building. Within these walls lies a deadly secret, forcing Val to face both her own traumatic past and deepest fears. I went into this movie knowing virtually nothing about it, and then read some reviews after I was done, and I was really impressed with this movie. It's a film that does a really great job of balancing real life trauma with genuine horror. And those are my favorite type of movies. I love films that take real life trauma and add horror elements to it. Some of my favorite filmmakers, Robert Eggers and Ari Aster, two more recent filmmakers that have done this in their work, where they take real life trauma and mix it in with supernatural horror. And I feel like this movie did it really effectively. The first thing I want to talk about is, after reading some of the reviews of this film, is intent with a movie and purpose. I read a lot of people who criticize this film because of the way that it's conveying its message and the subject matter as a whole, and like pushing a political agenda or whatever. And I always have a really hard time when I read comments like that, because art to me is all about expression and putting forth your opinions and your beliefs and conveying them into a film. And this movie is about sexual trauma and abuse and rape and molestation, and there's a lot of really deep subject matter in this. And what the director does so effectively well is shows this trauma by utilizing supernatural elements to create a horror atmosphere, to let you feel the true, genuine horror that these people who have suffered sexual trauma feel. And it's a really dark, isolated, horrifying movie. I thought that it was incredibly effective, that by the third act I was just broken to pieces for these people and the horrors that they've experienced, and how in 1974 in London, people didn't listen to women, and especially not well enough. If they were put in situations where they were subjects to abuse, not listening to them for validation. And I think these reviews that criticize this film for wanting to convey a powerful subject matter like that, they suck. And really, I love that women are using a platform to talk about abuse and talk about sexual trauma and put these things to film. And I think it's really important, and this movie does a really great job of conveying that message. So I want to talk about the cinematography. This movie utilizes its cinematography really well. There's a lot of shots that hold on these blank, empty spaces, and our lead character, Val, who's clearly gone through some trauma in her past, is terrified of the dark. And the camera focuses really heavily early on, when she's in the hospital during the day, on these spaces that are really dark, and seeing her facial expressions and her reactions to those spaces, and not wanting to be left alone in that isolation. And it's very impressive. And as the movie progresses and Val is left in this situation with maybe 3 other nurses in this vacant hospital during this blackout, you just really always feel present with her, and like you're experiencing what she's going through and her genuine terror in the dark. And like I said, this movie discusses some really heavy subject matter, and early on we're given slight glimpses into that and into her past, but we're not really fully revealed the total horrible elements until the third act. And what really makes it great is the director puts us in her situation and builds on that terror and that fear that she's going through. And it also utilizes that cinematography to showcase this space and how horrifying it is. And there's like these paintings on the wall in the children's ward that like the doctors' faces have been scratched out, and it just really does a lot for the movie and makes it a horrifying experience. Secondly, I want to talk about the sound design. The sound design in this movie is incredible. One of the things I liked the most about the film is just you constantly hear these people in the ICU ward and their machines going and their heavy breathing. And when Val is moving throughout this space, the sound design really adds to that overall fear, because when you're in that dark of a space and you're putting a camera in there to shoot, it's really hard to capture everything in the dark spaces. And what I love about this movie, it's not about what you see, but it's about what you hear and about the feeling that you get when you're alone in the dark and what kind of emotions that brings to you as a viewer. And I thought that was really impressive, was feeling what Val's character was feeling and being in those spaces. And then in the third act, when there's a big reveal as to why Val is afraid of the dark, it really just makes all of those things that you've experienced prior in the film so much more effective. And I was really impressed with the sound design in this movie. It's some of the best sound design I've heard in a film all year. Rose Williams, who plays Val, gives an incredible performance. She definitely steals the whole show. You're constantly with her character and feeling what she's feeling. And by the third act, when all of this heavy subject matter is revealed, and her performance is what makes it so great. And what's awesome about this movie is, with her performance, this movie juggles a lot of different supernatural elements. Haunting, possession, supernatural entities as a whole. There's a lot of subject matter that this movie juggles. And at times it doesn't work completely for me. There's a few times that it pulled me out of it. But I think that because of her performance, it's really effective, especially towards the third act when you're brought into these characters and there's this young girl, Saba, who's in the ward with Val. And their relationship builds as the movie goes on, and both of those performances are so great. And there's also these women who work in the ward at nighttime who we're introduced to, that their performances really add to the overall experience as well. And I think that because of all of those effective performances, you're really drawn into the material because they really fit their character profile so well, and those performances are just so strong that by the third act, you're just kind of floored by what has been showcased to you. I don't want to give away all of the plot points, obviously. Like I said, this movie does deal with sexual trauma and rape and molestation, and it's very brutal and it's hard to watch, but it's important that this movie was made. And I think more movies about this subject matter should be made, because sexual trauma is a horrible thing. And people that go through this and have to experience it and live through it, it's awful. And it's terrible that anyone would ever have to live through it. And I think Corinna is a director who has utilized these supernatural elements to convey the horrors and the experiences that people face through sexual trauma is really impressive. And it's definitely a movie I will not forget, and it's one that I think everyone should watch. That's my thoughts on The Power. I thought it was a really effective and well-made horror film. If you haven't seen it yet, I'd highly recommend checking out Shudder. I know I talk about it in a lot of my videos. I joke about getting sponsored by Shudder, but I really do love the streaming service, and they have some great content that not a lot of people see unless you have their service. I think last time I logged on, they're doing like a week-long free trial right now where you can go on and watch some of these movies I've talked about. I've got a playlist on my channel of all the Shudder horror films I've reviewed, a lot of them that were released this year. I'd highly recommend checking their catalog out. They've got a lot of really good stuff. So have you seen The Power yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was fantastic. One of the best films I've watched on Shudder all year. It's probably going to be in my top list of films of the year, and I'd highly recommend everybody check it out. As always, I've got a lot of new content coming out in the future, a lot of material for you guys I'm excited to share, and I hope that you've been enjoying the content because I'm having a lot of fun making it. As always, Internet, thanks so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.